This is Mirabella's Kitchen, and today I'm making shrimp and broccoli. If you'd like to cook with me, please check the description below for a list of the ingredients and a shout out to my patrons, Dennis, Andrea, Daryl, and Melissa. Thanks, guys. I start by taking 4 heads of broccoli and cutting off the florets into small bite-sized pieces. Next, I take 1 pound of peeled and deveined shrimp, and I'm cutting the backs of the shrimp deeper so they have more surface area for the sauce to get into. This is purely preference, it's not necessary. On my stove, I have a large pot of water coming up to a boil for blanching the vegetables and shrimp, some white rice cooking, and I also have a little pot for some chicken stock I'm going to be making. I take 4 cloves of garlic and I chop them. I'm using 4 small cloves, so 1 to 2 large cloves should be sufficient. I add a teaspoon and a half of better than bouillon chicken base to the small pot of water that's boiling. I whisk it together and set that aside. In the large pot of water that is boiling, I add in the broccoli and let these blanch for 90 seconds. I like to move them around to make sure no pieces are getting more heat than others. I then remove them with my spider to drain off any excess water and put them into a bowl. You can also put them into an ice water bath. I also add in the shrimp and let those blanch for about 30 seconds. Into a heat-resistant bowl, I add in the chicken stock that I just prepared because it's still pretty hot. I add in 1/4 of a teaspoon of white sugar, 1/2 teaspoon white ground pepper, 1 teaspoon dark soy sauce, 1.5 tablespoons of low sodium soy sauce, and 1 tablespoon oyster sauce. As well as a teaspoon of sesame oil. I whisk that together and set it aside for later. Into 2 tablespoons of heated vegetable oil, I add the garlic. I let that start to become fragrant and add in 1 to 2 tablespoons of Shaoxing cooking wine. My heat was a bit high, it started to sputter, so I recommend using a medium-ish heat for this. I then add in the sauce, and I'm going to let this come up to a boil and start to reduce. Once it is boiling, I add the shrimp in, and I add the broccoli. This is to start coating these items with the sauce as well as start to finish cooking them all the way through. I want the sauce to come back up to a boil, and then I'm going to thicken the sauce with a cornstarch slurry. Overall, I took about 3 tablespoons of cornstarch and maybe 4 to 5 tablespoons of water. I mix those together and make a slurry. I then add that into the sauce mixture. I like to make a little pool, add it in, and immediately start stirring to prevent clumps. You want this to come up to heat so it starts to thicken. I noticed even though it had started boiling again, it really wasn't thickening, so I added a little bit more of the slurry mixture, thus the amounts I gave. Once it thickened to the consistency I wanted it to be, which is not completely gravy thick, but not runny, I take some rice, add the broccoli and shrimp with some sauce, and that is my shrimp and broccoli. Thanks so much for joining me today. I make new videos on cooking every Thursday. Please support me on Patreon and on Facebook at Mirabella's Kitchen.